And we're live from the Leisure Room.
For this fifth episode of our racing awareness campaign. It is June by the time this comes out,
Yes.
so we're almost halfway. 3 weeks from the release date, I will be running my sixth marathon, and
Yeah.
then we will be officially halfway.
Crazy how much time just flies.
It's crazy. I mean, the proof is on the wall.
Right, yeah. So you just ran your 5th marathon here not too far in Durham, North Carolina,
I did.
only 2 weeks after you ran America's Toughest Road Marathon.
I did.
How are you feeling?
Well, it's Thursday, so it's been 5 days, and I have been able to walk the stairs.
Yeah, your recovery seems like it gets better and better after each.
It was tough, the last one. That one was definitely like a climb up, quite literally. And then since Durham was flat, my body was like, "Oh, we've done this." So
Yeah.
it's getting easier in every aspect, I feel like. So 5 marathons, and the most important parts to think of is 1, training, 2, running, and 3, recovering. And I think I'm getting in some kind of a groove in all 3 of them. I am able to motivate myself to go run. I think that's an important part. I am able to continue running um, at a decent pace during the marathon, and I am able to recover quickly.
Mhm.
On Monday, I was already back at the run club,
Yeah, that's right.
and I was going faster than many other people, with quite some soreness still sitting in my muscles. So it is getting easier. It's also getting more fun along the way because it's getting easier, so it's getting more fun. You know,
What is the motivation during your
the location. It is it is the forest. Well, it's a state forest, yeah, or state park. I think Olmsted State Park, which is in Raleigh, between Raleigh and Durham. It's a big forest next to the airport. Not that there's too much hinder from the airplanes, so it's nice running in the forest. I like having somewhat of a mental stimulation in the form of a forest or nature, or a greenway would do as well. I used to run along the greenways a lot, and it's a lot of change in scenery. Sometimes it's along neighborhoods, sometimes it's along rivers, and I like that. The mental stimulation is very important for me personally to be able to continue running.
Mhm.
If I want to run in my neighborhood, I can already dread from the morning when I wake up. It's like, oh, I need to run in this neighborhood this evening. And even though we are quite of a forested neighborhood, it's still one of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, everybody that wants to run, everybody that has the ambition to, mental stimulation. I say that's a very important one. And if you don't have the time, then make yourself.
It's just quite a time commitment.
It is a time commitment, especially doing the long distances. But even if you do short ones, go with a friend. If music is your thing, then use music. I don't run with music because I like to hear my breathing. What is happening? Why is that sound?
What you doing, Minnie? Was that you? We have 4 cats in the house right now.
Wow, that was weird. Yeah, mental stimulation. I don't run with music. I like to focus on my breathing, and I like to focus on my heart rate so I can know when to slow down, when to speed up. I don't like music. I do like people. Unfortunately, I haven't found people crazy enough to run at a 7-minute mile pace for 10, 15, 20 miles. So, yeah, and the loneliness is where I need the mental stimulation for. Yeah. So, marathons. I start to like doing them.
Yeah. Well, and our next marathon, which we will have released the location by the time the podcast comes out, but it's been a recent change.
Yes, we're going to Duluth, Minnesota.
Yes.
I'm running along Lake.
That'll be a cool run.
Oh yeah, I will probably set another PR depending on the wind.
Yeah.
The lake is pretty windy.
Maybe it will be pushing you from behind.
That's what I'm hoping. It's what was it? 25 miles straight, quite literally straight, and then just 4 turns to get onto the finish. I am hoping that I can get sub 3, but that is pushing another minute per mile off my current time, my current PR.
Mhm. It's quite a lot.
That is an insane amount of time.
And we're particularly excited about going to Minnesota because that is where some of the folks from the placenta are. So we're gonna get to finally meet them in person,
Yep.
hang out with them. I think that will be a nice trip.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. This is a marathon that was actually sold out, but thankfully we reached out to them and explained to them what we were doing, and they were so gracious enough to provide us with an entry into the marathon. I think that's pretty cool because apparently this grandma's marathon is a big deal up there.
Even for friends down here, when I say I'm going to the roof, it's like, "Oh, you're gonna do it with the grandmas?" I was like, "Yes,
Right?
sure, yeah." I would think that the one in Roanoke is more popular because that the toughest one is like a statement, but
Right.
nope. The flattest, straightest marathon of them all, that's the one everybody knows.
Well, then, after grandma's marathon, we are taking our campaign international.
Oh yeah, going to Europe, and more specifically, my birth grounds, not birthplace, but birth grounds, because I'm running a marathon dedicated to all the spaces and all the places that were important to me
Mhm.
when I was a kid, from my school to the house that I grew up in, to the youth movement, to certain nature areas that were important during certain relationships, and all that kind of stuff. You get it. So I mapped out a route, and the local campaign, or the international campaign, um, that I've called out is now 40K for 40 weeks.
Love that.
So that way, if other Belgian families with similar experience want to join,
Mhm.
then maybe we can extend it that way too.
Yeah,
I think that might be nice.
absolutely.
But there will be a cap in the amount of people because the idea is that I'm running and that everybody else is cycling around me, and maneuvering 100 people around tight European streets.
Might be a challenge.
That will be a challenge. Luckily, everybody knows how to cycle, and every car or every driver knows how to deal with bicycles. It's still an endeavor, so that will be fun. We will be cycling in Belgium July 11th. So if you see this and you want to be part of it, give us a reach out
Message.
to us,
Yeah.
give us a message, because this will be a private event and on invitation only. So yeah,
But it's gonna be fun because we will go through the route that you are running, sometime before the race or the run, and you'll kinda talk about basically your growing up. And I think that's gonna be great. I think it's also gonna be a great video just for our kids to look back on and see where their daddy grew up.
yeah, we're gonna talk about all those places that were important, and then montage them into a big
Yeah,
Hannes marathon kind of idea.
love it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so this is a trip that has been planned for
months,
I feel like.
almost a year almost.
Yeah, like, we knew going to Belgium, this time
2 years.
for, yeah, a couple of years.
Because we have 2 weddings to attend as well. Yes, that's
Yes.
obviously yeah,
Yeah.
of course. That's the main reason we were going, yeah.
Yeah, so a couple years this trip has been planned, and then, of course, when I was pregnant with Ellery, we were always imagining taking her to
Yep,
Belgium for the first time to where her dad was from, and she'd be 10 months old and get to stay with mom and grandpa. We attended the wedding, and obviously the trip looks a little different in that regard, but we decided to tie in the campaign to this trip.
of course. It's the most logical thing to do.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about friendship
Ooh.
and the loaded stories that are part of that?
Oh, in terms of our loss.
I think it might be interesting to, so anybody who has experienced this, a certain loss and is in the early stages, anybody that is involved in stillbirth, either as family, either as a friend. I think it might be interesting to maybe hear from our perspective how we have been. I want to use the word targeted, but that's not right. How we've been treated, maybe in a positive way, in a negative way, and the almost inevitable, yeah, label and mindsets that you get from people. You're Yeah, now this and the mindset around you is grief, or the mindset around you is this. So it has been on our. Um, we've talked about this many times
A lot. I feel like friendship in general, especially as an adult, is just a huge topic and
in our
thing
conversations.
in
Yes,
our conversations, yes, so I feel like we could do a whole podcast episode on just, like, talking about friendships and adulthood,
yes,
but in particular related to, like, since the loss of Ellery, it is very apparent how relationships, friendships have changed.
yes. And I don't think people mean to do it. It is just something that happens socially, and like, yeah,
Yeah.
if other people's brain perceive you different.
Yeah, they do, and I mean, we've lost friends, I feel like.
Oh yeah,
We've made new friends, and some of the friendships that we had before are still there, still as strong. They're still very well engaged, but you just never know because I will say if I knew it was gonna happen and could pick and choose what friendships were gonna stay and what weren't, I don't think I could have predicted the outcome.
you don't want to, but
Yeah.
we also want to keep all our friends.
Right, yeah. It's tough, but you go through something so life-changing, and then you as an individual also change. So that's a part of the
Yeah,
complication.
maybe we can be a little more specific. And one of the things I want to say is, um, there have been certain friends, like Noel and Brian, who have been on our sides ever since it all happened. They were the ones that came down and supported us for the weekend after.
Mhm.
We wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for them. They have they have quite literally held us up,
Yes, absolutely.
and they continue to do so even with a 5-month-old Liam.
Right?
And they are willing to share pictures. We are loving to see. Um, it's just fun to follow along.
It is, yeah.
I I will say that it does spark emotions.
Mhm.
And like, okay, Elodie would be 8 months right now. Would she be doing? But I want to be part of Liam's story too,
Yes.
and I don't want to be actively, passively taken away from that.
Mhm. And I feel like we have been from other relationships, just people making the decision for us, you know?
You can't always blame him. I
No,
will say that,
I have no blame towards the people. Like, I've always said that, like, no blame, no whatever,
but it's
but
more
it
hurtful in a way.
hurts. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we should not be defined by stillbirth. And we make it very apparent because we do this podcast and all the awareness that we do around it. But I think, yeah, perceive it as something that we are too.
Yeah. And it's not this negative thing. And I think a lot of people view it as just such a, like, negative thing, and our goal is to positively remember Ellery and positively talk about her and keep her part of our family. So, I think for some people, like, bringing up Ellery or talking about her experience, it's just this, like, emotional, like, negative and emotional thing, which for us, when we bring her up, it's not always to talk about the bad of it, but it's just to talk about it because she's our daughter, and we wanna talk about our daughter just like anybody else out there with a son or daughter wants to talk about their children
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I imagine having a daughter next to you and be like, "Oh, this thing, such a negative being." I was like, "No, she's alive, she's happy."
Yeah,
Why does our kid because she didn't make it have to be the sad thing?
right.
I do think, in one particular case, a friend of ours that is pregnant, it brings up a lot of I mean, one, you're pregnant and you already go through so many emotional spins. Having friends that have lost it to a cause that happened way at the end of the pregnancy. And yeah, I feel for them in
Mhm.
terms of how much stress that can bring to their current pregnancy. And running away from us is one option, obviously, but yeah, it will still be in the back of your mind, I think,
Yeah,
depending on what kind of personality you have. If you're more of a worrying person or not,
yeah.
in this case, it is, but
Mhm. Well, and it's just the lack of communication, which I feel like has happened with multiple relationships. I feel like just the communication stopped.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, I don't, in this particular case, this is somebody very close. So I finally reached out and was like, "What's going on?" And the person was honest, and basically it came down to, like, just feeling very, like, anxious and stressed, and so, like, not wanting to even hear or not I don't wanna say not wanting to hear about it, but, like, when Ellery would be talked about or, here in the house, we have pictures, like, it would just, at the end of the day, like, bring up stress and anxiety. And so they just decided to just stop communication and contact, which wasn't the best way of handling it, but I just wish, yeah, people would just talk to us and be like, "I am struggling," or, because now that we're working through it, we're understanding and we're getting it, but it is still tough too because this person recognizes that, like, Ellery's a part of my life, always will be, that's not gonna change. What happened isn't gonna change.
it doesn't necessarily will happen to you.
Right, and so there's that balance of, like, not letting it affect your own fears
Right.
and anxiety.
Yeah. So there's different ways that people deal with this as a friend kind of perspective. I think over time the wave will flatten out.
Mhm,
Um, yeah. Well, currently we lost a few friends. We gained a few new ones.
and I'm very thankful for the ones who stuck around and who have been very supportive of all of this and very much saying Ellery's name and making sure that, like, we remember that we're still family, all of us, so
Yeah.
I think that's yeah. You really see, like, who your true friends are, and I know that's not an easy thing, I'm sure, to do and to hold up. I think another thing is very, very early on, a lot of people would be like, "Let us know if you need anything.
Mhm.
We'll do this, we'll do that."
And then when you do, you never hear from them.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it was just, like, words, like, it's just something you say, you know?
I mean, well, but most of it was food because there were periods that we just could not cook. And eating out is also not something we wanna go do because then we have to go out. So staying in
Yeah,
was the only option, and having people bring food was something that was very helpful, and some people offered. We wanted to take them up on that offer and never received.
yeah, yeah, again, I think it's something that they just say, like, "I'll do this." And they don't it's almost like we've talked about this before, but the, "Hey, how are you?" "Good, how are you?" And it's like, you don't mean the answer, you're asking the question.
It's conversation starter.
Yeah, I don't like that question.
And I don't know if it's because I'm rational or I've become or because I'm emotional, but every time somebody says, "How are you doing?" And when it was just after me running a marathon, I'm like, "I'm dead." And he's like, "Excuse me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, I just ran a marathon. You asked me how I'm doing. I'm honestly answering." And that frustrates many people.
I have been very aware of this question since losing Eller, particularly at work, because I see so many people in a day, and I would say the majority of my patients ask me when I go in and introduce myself how I'm doing, and I just don't answer.
You just don't.
I just don't answer because I have not figured out a better way
It's
of
fine.
doing it, but it's not true.
No, but there is I'm good and I'm fine. And fine is like, I'm hanging in there, but don't ask any more questions. And I'm good is like, oh,
I don't know. I feel like I set the mood, and I've always set that kind of mood before I'm meeting them. So normally how I do it is like I go and I'll be like, "I'm Celeste, I'm a BA," and they'll be like, "Hey, how are you?" Or no, 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 no. It's usually
same
the
here.
other way around. It's usually other way around. I'll walk in and they'll be like, "Hi, how are you?" And you'll be like, "I'm Celeste, I'm a BA." So they probably just think I'm stupid. They're probably just like, "I didn't ask her who she was. I asked her how she was." I don't really care because especially, like, on the harder days, like, I'm not what am I gonna say? I'm either gonna lie and be like, "Good," and move on, or I mean, I'm not gonna be like, "No, I'm about ready to cry."
Yes, yeah, I'm doing all right. How about yourself? Just refer the question back, and people are king in heaven. They're talking to you like, oh, he's asking how I'm doing. That's just pushing it back on them. That's
But
how.
I almost never get asked the question again. There's only every now and then will realize that I don't answer the question, and I'll introduce myself, and then they'll be like, "How are you?"
Really?
Yeah, like, and those people I think really truly wanna know. I think everybody else, they're just asking the question because that's a social thing
Mhm.
that people do.
I mean, even in Dutch it is. Not in English, but in Dutch. Uh, and I'm always the one truly answering that question with the 5 sentences, and nobody else.
Right? They just want the standard, "Good, how are you?"
Yeah, they do. Anyway,
Yeah. Long quite a tangent that we got on, but
so for a long story short, for anybody that's experiencing this in an early stage, or somebody that knows somebody that's experiencing this as a friend, as a family member, know that for the people around them, things are changing from a social, from a uh, friendship level. So,
their life doesn't go back to what it was before just because they lost
yep,
their child. And I think that's the connection that we find with other stillbirth parents is that they very much made the child they lost a part of their family. They talk about their son or daughter, and they understand that we also wanna talk about Ellering, she's a part of our family, and I think that's a hard thing to understand if you haven't experienced it.
yeah, there's a certain level of communication that happens,
Yeah.
like non-judgmental, non-emotional. It's just another conversation,
Mhm.
and yeah, there's no good or bad if you haven't experienced it. Well, no, there's a very bad if you experienced it. There's not a very good or bad in how you go by the conversation when you haven't experienced it.
Yeah.
Um, but do open the conversation up. Obviously, know the person you're talking to, and if they're ready for it, and if they're that kind of person. But in many cases, at least the one people that we have found, they very much want to talk about it or want to be talked to. Period.
Yes, yes, yes.
We're not some dark cloud that we should walk around, otherwise we get wet.
Yeah,
No, just yeah. If you want to bring up Ellery, then we bring up Ellery. But if you don't, then we talk about nuclear power plants. I
yeah,
know.
right. Well, on other updates, we met with yet another OB provider.
Yes, we did.
Yes, just this past week. Completely different clinic, um, outside of the providers that we see before.
Disclaimer: we're not pregnant.
Yeah.
Before people started saying that, yeah.
I think it was overall a pretty reassuring conversation that we had, I would say.
The big difference was that she was empathetic.
Yeah.
She had empathy. That's the word. Yes, which I mean, sorry, doctors, you guys have studied for long. You should have studied some
Bedside manner?
people skills. Have empathy. If you don't have empathy, don't become a doctor.
Yeah.
So this was she an MD?
She was a nurse practitioner.
Okay, and so yeah, pretty empathic, listening, and even though you don't have a straight answer or are able to provide the service that you're requesting, still accept the questions that we ask.
Yeah, I mean, we really just wanted to have a conversation. We wanted someone to listen to us and provide their professional feedback. And the last time we tried to do this, that doctor would not even like listen to us and just was very belittling and very rude, just straight up rude. And that's not because we were just looking for answers. We just had questions. But yeah, a lot has evolved since then. So this conversation and what we wanted out of it, I think looked almost a little different than the last time. But we listened. I will say a little rocky here and there, the conversation still. Like it wasn't perfectly smooth going because there was a moment where I was getting a little I could feel my blood starting to boil inside me.
Maybe if there's any medical professional in this field listening to this or watching this, be very careful with saying the cause might not always be. You might not always know why your baby died. Just stop saying that.
Yeah.
Just stop. Because we do have a cause. Granted, it's placenta. We don't know what was wrong exactly with the placenta, because according to our previous podcast, there are multiple ways, but it's placenta related. And that's close enough to monitor in the next pregnancy.
Yeah.
Whatever the cause was. If it's genetic, then that will, some cases return again. And if you measure it, you can see it. If it was something else, disruption, then you will probably also see it. But saying, yeah, I'm sorry for your loss, and not every stillbirth is explained.
I thought right there when
Saying that.
she started going into that route of, like, unexplained, I wish I could the reason for your daughter's death, I thought it was going to, from that point on, just go the direction of the previous conversation. But you jumped in, I feel like yeah, rerouted the conversation, and ultimately, I think she ultimately clarified that it wasn't necessarily like you just said, it was more she was wanting to know, like, the reason for the small placenta. Anyway, she everyone stayed calm, and she did, like, listen to our concerns beyond that, and we actually got into the conversation of placental measurements, which I wasn't sure going into if that was something we were gonna talk about or not or get into, I just kinda wanted to see the vibes. But we did.
So we have a light that we can follow. Once we're pregnant, we'll
Mm.
see how it unfolds. So stay tuned.
They have agreed, though, to do placental measurements for the next pregnancy. It's
Yeah,
in writing. I saw
yeah.
it. It is in
Well,
writing.
if they don't know how to do it, then we know where to get the courses.
Well, she seemed to understand it and know it
Right.
without us having to really explain it, and she actually paused, our visit to go and talk with 2 of the doctors and about the measurements and if it was something that they would be willing to do, and they said yes, ultimately.
Which was a huge relief.
Yes, we high five. We were like, "Yeah."
I mean, I've been trying to find an analogy, and I think the closest that I can come up with is you had cancer and you are healed. Luckily, good for you. But obviously, cancer chances are coming back. Okay. And so you go for your screening again, aka you're pregnant again, and then you go to the facility and like, oh yeah, we're not screening for that particular cancer that you had because it's not standard of care. We do all the other cancer, but not that particular one. I was like, what is this? I'm here for this one, but almost killed me. And aka it killed her daughter. maybe you might want to scan for this particular one.
Yeah,
That was the best analogy I could come up
yeah.
with. I hope that satisfies how we perceive things.
Yeah, but it is once again, like, frustrating because before we talked about the placental measurements, she was talking to us about monitoring for next pregnancy with, again, invasive methods
Oh yeah,
when it wouldn't look at the placenta or evaluate the placental health of the pregnancy, and that's ultimately what we would want, and I mean, we straight up told her, we like, "We don't want any of this invasive testing." Like, ideally, we want simple measurements because
start with non-invasive, and if necessary, we can go. But
yeah, I mean, if we needed invasive and the benefits of doing it outweigh the risks, then okay, that's a consideration, but in our case, there's really not an indication for these invasive testing. We talked to Dr. Kleiman, who also agreed. He said that's ridiculous, but I also kind of thought it was funny how when she told us that they would do EPV, that she said she followed it up with, "But it won't change your plan based on what we find because you're already getting the additional monitoring." And to me, that implies that if you were doing placental measurements and you found it was small, that would prompt additional monitoring.
that's what we will find out.
I mean, but then she's saying that because I'm already getting the additional monitoring, the plan of care won't change. I'm like,
Well, if you find a small placenta, then your care will change according to the small placenta.
right. So then it's like, so why are we not measuring the placenta in every pregnant patient if it could potentially change their care?
Yeah.
You know, such an easy thing to do. And if it's small or maybe too large, it would prompt more monitoring of the baby and the pregnancy. And she did kinda mention we're just gonna do the 20-week placental measurements, and then if something was off, she did kinda mention maybe we can repeat another measurement. So, we'll see
We'll see.
when that time comes.
All right. Is it time to introduce the special guest of the month?
Yes, our next guest is Amanda Duffy. She lost her second child, Reese, at 39 weeks, just 16 hours prior to her scheduled delivery. Reese's death was due to a double nuchal cord, something that was seen multiple times on scans leading up to the delivery, but Amanda was reassured. In the days leading up to Reese's death, Amanda also noticed a change in movement and had an intuition that something was wrong, but her concerns were dismissed. Reese's death could have been prevented with better education around stillbirth prevention, particularly fetal movement. In the months following Reese's death, Amanda and her husband, Chris, channeled their grief into positive change and pursued legislative action in the state of Minnesota, where they were able to pass a bill in 2016 that provided stillbirth families with a tax credit to help cover medical and funeral expenses. Amanda is also mother to Reese's three siblings, Rhett, Rogan, and Maida, and she continues to advocate for stillbirth prevention and is currently a Count the Kicks state ambassador, all in honor for her beautiful daughter, Reese. Please welcome our next guest, Amanda Duffy.
Well, thank you, Amanda, for being here tonight. So let's start off with what is your story? What is your child's story? And how does that play into your family right now?
My daughter Reese was stillborn November 2nd of 2014 at 4:47 p.m. She was 8 pounds, 3 ounces, and 20 and a half inches long.
Yep.
Uh, I have a picture. I'll show you a picture of her as well. So
Yes, please
this is
do.
Reese.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh,
And she had bright red hair, just like my
yes.
husband.
Same as
So
Ellery.
Ellery
yes,
had also
Ellery
bright red hair.
too.
Yep.
I had no idea that stillbirth was even a thing. That was even something I should have on my radar. She was scheduled for a C-section. I was scheduled for a C-section with her the next day. And so I went into the hospital that night or the day before she was born because of reduced movement. When I went into the hospital, I just thought maybe we'd have a baby that day. And I got there, I called the nurse, I hadn't felt the baby. I use Reese and the baby kind of interchangeably because I didn't know that she was a girl at the time. So when I tell the story, sometimes I say the baby.
That's fine.
So I called our midwife because I was having contractions that morning. I was really focused on the contraction piece. And then a little bit later in the morning, I realized, oh, the contractions kind of stopped. And that's when I started realizing, oh, I haven't felt her move that much. And so I ate something sugary, drank something cold, and I went and laid down. And at the time, we had our oldest son, he was 19 months old. So he went down for a nap, and then I went and laid down. I hadn't told my husband that I was worried at that point yet. I figured baby just needed to move, for me to lay down. And I sat there for 20, 30 minutes, felt nothing. And I got back up, went into the living room. My husband was going to go for a run. And I saw him put his running shoes on, and I just blurted out, I haven't felt the baby kick. And he was like, oh, maybe we should call the midwife. I said, yeah, maybe we should. So he called. The midwife said, well, why don't you come into the hospital? Maybe the baby just needs a car ride to be woken up. So we called my mother-in-law who was going to meet us at the hospital to take our son. And I called her and I said, we're going to go to the hospital. I'm not having a baby, but they just want to monitor the baby a little bit. And so she's like, okay, we'll meet you there. And as we're driving, that's when I started to realize and started to think like something might be wrong, but I never really thought it would be that she would be born dead. So we got to the hospital, we parked, and as we're walking to labor and delivery, my husband said, how are you doing? And I just said, I just need to hear the baby's heartbeat. And something inside of me, some voice inside of me said, but you won't. Like there was just something there that was like, this isn't right.
Mm.
And we got up to labor and delivery and I checked in and the nurse that was sitting there, like there was no sense of urgency. So that was kind of some reassurance to me because I was like, oh, if they're not worried, then maybe I shouldn't be worried either. Um, and the nurse that checked us in was just like, oh, we noticed you're on the books for tomorrow for a delivery. They won't make you go home tonight. You'll just deliver the baby tonight. And I thought, oh, okay. And so when we went into triage, one nurse came in, they had me fill out paperwork. So really no sense of urgency, like at all. Filled out the paperwork. A nurse came in, got the Doppler ready, was moving it around, couldn't find the heartbeat. And then she said, where was the baby usually, like, where do you usually hear your baby's heartbeat? And at this point, like, I'm full term for the most part. And like, you could put the Doppler anywhere in my stomach. And I was like, I mean, here. So she's like, let me step out. I'll get a different Doppler. And that's when I knew. That's when I knew. And my husband was distracted with my son. So he wasn't really paying attention. And so then the nurse came back in and she put the Doppler on my stomach and we heard a really fast heart rate. And my husband goes, oh, there it is. And I said, no, that's mine. And the nurse said, yes, that's your wife's heartbeat. And she's like, I'm going to step out, get the ultrasound machine and the doctor. Baby must be tucked in there a little weird, and we'll just get a good look that way. That's when I started crying. My mother-in-law came into the room, grabbed my son, and she left. And my husband just grabbed my hand. And it felt like 20 minutes before the doctor got there. I don't know how long it was. Like I have no concept of time. But the doctor came in with the ultrasound machine, turned the monitor towards her, and so I couldn't see it. And she put the Doppler on my stomach, the same spot where we always would hear Reese's heartbeat. And she just looked at the screen. And inside I just kept saying, like, just say it. Just say it. I know it's just say it. And she just said, I'm so sorry, but there's no heartbeat. I had this like out of body, like this guttural scream that came out of me. And my husband started asking questions like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, what do we do now? What? And she cut him off and she said, I have to do one thing. I can't answer your questions right now. And so she broke my water and she inserted two clips into Reese's skull to check for um, cardiac activity in her skull, so blood flow. And she turned this machine on and there were two beeps. And so she called code and said, we're going into an emergency C-section. To my husband, you can't come with. And she started rushing me down the hallway. And I got into the OR and there was a nurse with me. And she just said, you're in really good hands. We're going to do all that we possibly can to save this baby. but you're gonna feel some pain right now, and then you're gonna be out." And so she injected medication into me, and I was out. And I woke up later on to I could hear the doctors kind of talking around me, and I didn't wanna open my eyes because I didn't wanna get the news. The doctor finally said, "Amanda, open your eyes." And so I did, and she said, "You have a beautiful little girl." She was born with the umbilical cord wrapped twice tightly around her neck, and unfortunately, we couldn't resuscitate her. And I remember I had the pulse thing on my finger, and like my pulse just like went through the roof. I had oxygen mask on, and I was sobbing. I looked over and I saw my husband, and he was vomiting, and it was just like it was too much. And then a nurse said, "Would you like to see your daughter?" And I knew I wanted to, but I was terrified because I didn't know what a baby that was stillborn looked like. And they wheeled her in, and they placed her in my arms, and I immediately stopped crying, and just I was filled with just this undeniable love, and I looked at her, and I knew that that was her, like, I just knew it. Um, and I pulled her hat off, saw a full head of red hair, and, a side tangent, when I was in 3rd grade, I had a dream, and I had a dream that I was gonna have a little girl with red hair, and I told my mom that when I was in 3rd grade, and she said, "Well, then you better marry somebody with red hair, because you have none of that in your family." And so when Reese was placed in my arms, I was like, "This is it. This is the person, this is the girl I've known for almost my whole life." And she was perfect. She was still warm to the touch. Um, you know, her cheeks were still pink. If I didn't know better, she was sleeping. And there was a nurse that was beside me, and she just said, "Your daughter is so beautiful." I will always say that that nurse is the person that taught me in that moment that you can love and grieve at the same time. And I just thought, like, "This is it. This is all I get with her." And then, when I leave the hospital, that's it. Um, but they started to kind of teach me that, like, you can do both things. And so we went down to the hospital room. We spent 24 hours with her, and, I had family members come, from both sides, my husband's family and my family. I also have a friend, her son died at birth, and I was texting her, like, what do I do? I don't know what to do." And she suggested, put a time frame on it, like, say you're gonna spend 24 hours with your daughter, and then you have to figure out what's next because you're never gonna wanna say goodbye. Like, there's never gonna be a good time to say goodbye and leave. And so we spent 24 hours with her. We had a pastor come baptize her at 4:47 PM on November 3rd, which was a day that was supposed to be her birthday. And then we wheeled her out. And the nurses I was terrified of I didn't want her cold. Like, I was very fixated on her not being cold. And so I told the nurses, like, "She needs to be wrapped in her blankets and her hat, and her lips are really dry. Please put something on her lips." And the nurses were so fantastic that they were like, "This is normal. Yeah, like, I will absolutely take care of her, and if you wanna see her again while you're still here, we'll bring her back." And they bathed her, took photos of her. We were lucky enough to have a photographer come from now lay me down to sleep and take photos. And that experience to watch somebody mold your baby, like, she looked like she was sleeping, and it was such a mind I could not wrap my mind around the fact that this baby is dead, but she looks like she's just sleeping, and it was just so hard to figure that out. After we said goodbye, I left, the hospital, and that was the same time that the funeral home came to pick her up. We had her cremated because we didn't know. We didn't know what we were what if we were ourselves as adults going to be cremated, so we figured we would cremate her so we could bring her home, in a sense, to figure out what was next. And so I was discharged from the hospital, and then we went home, and then that's when I always say, like, life ended as we knew it. My life that I once had is over, and I was thrust into this life that I never wanted. To figure out how do you live with your child who's dead, and how do you keep their memory with you and there's so few people met them. How are they not going to be forgotten? And so that's kind of what the anger and figuring out that her death could have been prevented, better education is what thrust me into like, the next stage of my life. And that anger, and I was pissed, like pissed off for many, many, many months. And that's what like drove
Yeah.
me to get out of bed is the fact that it didn't have to happen. And I would not let this happen to others if I had any control over it.
What a similar story somehow. Like the similarities between yours and ours, different cause, but still emotionally
Mhm.
a whole similar experience. I feel like. So this was your second. Reese was your second child,
Yep.
right? And do you have subsequent kids after that?
Yes.
So you have both spectrums, yeah. So talk a little bit about how was it to have a second kid and how was it to have two afterwards still?
I knew that if I was going to get pregnant again, that I could not go back to the same clinic or the same hospital. Because I met with them shortly after Reese died and I wanted to go through my medical records. I wanted to know how this could happen. And I asked them the question of how, what will you change moving forward to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And I knew exactly what they were doing. They said, "Well, we reviewed everything, and we would make no different decisions." And I knew in that moment that I was not going to be safe in their care, nor was my child. So I met with a maternal fetal medicine doctor before I found a different clinic, and I had them write a birth certificate because I knew she died on their watch, and so that they were going to get me the care that I wanted because there was some guilt there. So I had them write it down. Um, and it meant, starting at 26 weeks, I would have NSTs, BPTs every other week until 32 weeks. And then I'd be going twice a week to do those things. And I would deliver at 37 weeks. I needed them to have that in writing. And then from there, I went and interviewed other doctors and different clinics until I found one that said yes. I will do that and we will do this together. And the doctor that I found was so authentic and honest. And she said, I can't guarantee that this won't happen again, but I will do all that I possibly can to make sure that it doesn't. And that's all I needed to hear. Because I felt like with Reese's care and my care when I was pregnant, is they gave up on her. They gave up on me. They didn't think it would happen. So instead of giving me the information I needed, they chose not to, and she died. And so finding her to move forward with subsequent pregnancies is what got me through the subsequent pregnancies.
So you were given the care that you requested.
Yes.
Awesome. Was it a tough search? Because we're talking 14 years ago in
Mhm.
Minnesota. I'm not sure how
Yeah.
different it is in North Minnesota compared to North Carolina and other states. You said you went to multiple doctors. Was it a tough search to find the right one?
Um, yes. So we got met with a lot of pushback um, when we were asking for what we were asking for. We had a couple doctors say we will not deliver that early. One of the doctors specifically said we won't deliver that early because there's a higher chance of learning disabilities that would happen if a baby is born early. And I said I would gladly take a child that I get to see grow and thrive in my arms if it meant an earlier delivery. And what I really was looking for is a doctor that would treat me like a person and not a liability.
Very happy to hear you found that one doctor. Yeah, and have two healthy little puppies afterwards.
Yeah.
Yep.
How did you ultimately come to find out the cause of Reese's death?
Yeah, so when she was born, they found the nuclear cord wrapped around her neck twice, and there was no blood flow through it, and so they had said we're fairly certain that this is what caused her death. And leading up to her birth, so I had something called polyhydramnios, so excess amniotic fluid with no known cause. So they couldn't figure out why I had it, and so I had twice weekly biophysicals with Reese leading up to her delivery, starting at 35 weeks. During those biophysicals, I saw her cord wrapped around her neck. And I was told that that was normal, that babies are born all the time with cords looped and wrapped, and that I shouldn't worry about it. and that my baby wasn't to be born a cuddler. So when she was born and it was discovered that she died because of that, that is what infuriated me because I noted that her movements were changing. I was never educated on tracking fetal movements consistently in the third trimester, but I knew something felt off around 36 weeks. And I told my doctor, and I was told that baby slow down. And so looking back, knowing what I know now, I knew that if I had been educated on stillbirth prevention, if I'd been educated on the risks of polyhydramnios, I didn't know that stillbirth was a factor. And I know that if I would have known that and been given that information, I would have advocated differently for Reese.
Even if it's a couple days early, then you
Right.
deliver.
So in your subsequent care for your 2 subsequent pregnancies, do you feel like there was that education throughout those pregnancies?
I felt like I was doing just as much educating as they were educating for me. I felt like I was educating them about what I
Yeah.
needed in my subsequent pregnancies. Um, and having to advocate and not so much for my own OB, but it was like all of the ultrasound appointments or the front desk or the nurse that I met with at check-in. They were like, "Why are you coming in for so many appointments? Why are you?" And it's like I had to feel like I had to keep telling them, "Well, my daughter died, and this is why I'm doing it." And telling people like, "I want all of the information. So if there are risks, if there are things that you're seeing, I want that information, and then I get to decide whether I have questions or whether I'm scared or I'm anxious. You don't get to withhold information from me because you don't want to deal with an anxious pregnant person." And so I did feel like there was a lot of educating, but like I told myself I would never not ask the questions and be potentially pegged as a crazy person if it meant the care of my baby. Because with Reese, I didn't want to be viewed as like that crazy, anxious, pregnant person. I was so worried about that that I didn't Google what polyhydramnios was. I trusted that they would tell me. I didn't Google like what a nuchal cord even. I didn't do any of that because I trusted that they would tell me all that information in my appointments.
So, I know it's been a while since Reese died. Have you seen much progress in terms of, like, prenatal education and care since you lost Reese to today?
No, not a lot, unfortunately. I think a lot of it falls on the families and the parents having to educate and push for change and justify why they need extra additional monitoring or why they're feeling the way that they're feeling. Like I would have loved to not have to have Reese die in order for me to be able to deliver earlier with my subsequent pregnancies, but that's a reason for an earlier delivery is a prior stillbirth. Like, why does my child have to die in order for me to deliver a little earlier, you know?
Right.
Yeah, or even just get, like, better care because it's kind of crazy, like, was talking the other day, I've always kinda thought this is crazy. You have your confirmation ultrasound, you have your 20-week anatomy scan, and that's it.
That's it.
Like, standard of care for most people, they don't have an ultrasound in the second half of pregnancy. That
Yep.
whole second half of pregnancy, that baby is never looked at.
Yep.
And so it's like, why do we have to lose a child to get what should already be done and what is being done in other countries, thus they have lower stillbirth rates?
Yes. And it's about prevention and about talking about it. And like I'll always say, talking about stillbirth doesn't make stillbirth happen, but not talking about it ensures that it's going to continue to happen. And because if a provider is not brave enough for whatever reason, it's going to continue to happen. But when there are other countries that have implemented safeguards and it works, why aren't we?
Money. Money is always the answer.
Yep, absolutely.
But then on a side note, you could think a lost baby is less taxes in for the IRS. So they might want to, for their own benefit, if they want to have more taxes, keep
Yep.
some babies alive, you know?
And the cost of stillbirth, like the longevity of it, like if you don't do prevention work to prevent stillbirth, then a person, if they get pregnant again after a stillbirth, they require more care they require mental health services. They require like so much more. So if you could prevent stillbirth and you're willing to invest there, think of all the money that you're going to save.
Yeah. I mean, it goes with anything in healthcare. I mean, like prevention. I mean, I worked in primary care. You really focus with your patients on prevention
Yes.
of high blood pressure, prevention of diabetes, because the cost of developing those things is much higher and worse, not just financial, but physical cost as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, how did you navigate talking to Reese's brothers and sister about Reese? Like, with your child that you already had when Reese died, but then also, like, raising 2 kids after that as well.
So Rogan, he's our oldest. He was 19 months old when Reese was born. So he knew there was a baby in my belly. He knew that, we were going to bring a baby home. And so when I got home from the hospital, he pointed to my belly and said baby. And I said, "No, buddy, there's no baby." Um and so we started by describing very like black and white terms of like the baby's heart stopped, and the baby is in heaven. And he didn't know what heaven was like that, but it was just like babies up in the sky or, like that kind of talking that way. And then as he got older, we started to share a little bit more with him and then a little bit more. Um, and with her, Reese's younger brother and sister, they've always known that they have an older sister. And we've kind of framed it as like she's the one that got to pick out red and made of our family. And we've framed it as she is just as much a part of our family as mom and dad are, brother and sister. Um, and so she's very present in what we do. We always include her in the number count. We talk about her all the time. Like we've got photos of her up. The kids have photos in their bedrooms of her. And so she's just a part of our life, and we've just talked about her in that way, and shared kind of age appropriate information. And this was the first year actually on Reese's birthday when she would have turned 11 that we shared with our kids like the full story because our youngest now is almost 9, and just shared with them. And they had questions about her urn, and so they wanted to look at the ashes, and like we did that, and so we were able to share for the most part a large portion of her story.
Beautiful. I guess moving on to how you channeled your grief into positive change. Celeste asked earlier, have you seen any differences in the standard of care? Tell us about how you are still like in the field, so to speak, how you keep track of what is happening in the world of pregnancy, and what do you do, basically? Yeah.
So, soon after Reese died, that's when I found out that sometimes the first and only indicator of fetal distress is a change in baby's movements. And I found Count the Kicks, which is an organization, or Have Healthy Birthdays, an organization that has Count the Kicks, which is a public health campaign about the importance of tracking fetal movement in the third trimester for stillbirth prevention purposes. I had never heard of that before. I had never heard of consistently tracking, like none of it. And so when I heard that and I found that out, I was like, there are resources for pregnant people to use to help combat this. And so that's when I kind of started to tap into there are things that can be done, and I can use my own, education, my own life experience, and essentially my privilege to be able to help make sure that this doesn't happen to other people. And again, like I said, the first few years, I was so pissed off and angry. So I used that. Like I didn't know where else to put it because I had so much anger. And so I funneled it into that work. After Reese died, that's when we found out that like, stillborn babies don't have personhood in the state of Minnesota because they never took a breath. So therefore, no life insurance. We don't get our bill with Reese, hospital bill, was actually more expensive than her older brother who was born alive. We don't get a birth, or we don't get a birth certificate. We got a stillbirth certificate. We don't get the tax credit that would help pay for funeral costs because she didn't take a breath. And so that just made me even more mad because this is my baby. She is a human and she's a baby and she's loved and she's wanted. And yet now these entities are saying that she doesn't matter.
Right.
And so my husband and I decided that there's got to be something that we can do. So we started doing some research about tax credit, like just what can we do, and that's when we decided to connect with some local legislators to talk about this stillbirth tax credit, because there had been a few other states in the U.S. that had passed something like that, and neither one of us have any kind of legislative background, like nothing, no political background, and so we really leaned on our local representatives to help us and then to say, here's who you should talk to next, and here's how you should talk to next. And so we were able to get this bill drafted and get, co-authors on this bill. We're meeting with people, sharing our story, fumbling through it, and people were so receptive. And we found that even in those meetings, we are educating people on what stillbirth is. But if we don't do it, who's going to do it? So
Right.
in 2016, the Minnesota tax relief bill passed. So any family that experienced their baby being stillborn would receive a $2,000 tax credit. And it's a symbolic gesture of the state, but it helps acknowledge their baby and also can help offset some of those medical costs and the cost of a funeral and all the other things that come with when your baby is
Maternity
stillborn.
leave and all that kind of
Yep.
stuff. Yeah, there's quite a few flaws in the system
Yes.
that we have found. Like you're not eligible for your maternity and paternity leave. So,
Correct.
like, how is that even a thought that that's an option?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
it shouldn't be about the baby. It should be about the person that delivered the baby.
Yep. Absolutely.
Um, but what I'm very interested in, because I'm also not very political, but I do.
Mhm.
Uh, so how am I framing this? I do like to see positive change, and especially if it comes from non-political people, because they have usually their interest in a different perspective. It's not always tied to money, so to speak. So how did you do it? How you said you talked to so many people. Like, how long did it take? Was it inviting them over for dinner? Was it? I don't know. I don't know how you
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, no, it's such a good question because I didn't know what I was doing either. So what we did is we first met with our local representative for our district. She actually came over to our house and we told her our story. And we said, "We don't know where to go from here, but we know we have to go somewhere." And she's
Yeah.
like, "Okay, here's who you talk to next." And so we started having those meetings. One of our friends was also a lobbyist. So he helped us out a little bit too, and then the ball just kind of kept rolling. And it was like when people started hearing our story, representatives, they were like, "Yes, what can we do? We want to help you." And the fact that this was our life experience, but also knowing that the state doesn't do anything for us to support us, there was obviously a gap there, which made it a little bit easier to tell our story. And so from that point, then we found a state senator that said, "Yes, I will author this bill." So we'll draft it together. And then what happened was we kind of have to let it go. And then that author takes it and tries to get a hearing so that we can go into the state legislator and share our story and why this is important. And so that's what happened. I mean, we were flying by the seat of our pants, just letting that chief author and the co-authors kind of lead and say, here's what we're doing next. And then they would say, like, you have to draft a statement and we're going to go in front of the Senate and we're going to talk about it. And it's going to be 2 minutes. It's going to be quick. And we're like, okay. And we honestly had no idea what we were doing. But as we were going through it, we were very honest with them. We're like, what's next? What do we do? How can you help us? And everyone was very welcoming with that. And that's when I started realizing, like, oh, these people are just humans too. Like, we want to help. So
Wow.
Oh, that's awesome.
How long did it take from that first talk with the local rep to the signing of the bill?
the local rep happened in 2015. So it was like April of 2015, and the bill passed in May of 2016.
So a little over a year.
Yep.
That's quite some patience right there.
And we met with our local rep. Session was almost over, so we knew that there was no way we were going to be able to get anything in that session. So we met with her, and then we spent some time outside of the session. Was not there was nobody meeting. We started building relationships with people so that when session came back in again in Minnesota, then people already knew who we were, kind of knew what we wanted to do, and we could re up those conversations, saying like, "Hey, remember when we talked in August? now we're doing the work. And so it's all relationship building is what I found.
Yeah. I mean, that's politics for you, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there an initial, like, I want this in the bill, and then you got a whole separate outcome, or was it still somewhat lined up with your goal?
Yeah, it was still pretty lined up. We did when we were meeting with people, especially people from the tax committee, they had a lot of questions about like, well, if we're going to offer a tax credit for you, what's gonna stop somebody from wanting a tax credit from if their child dies of cancer or if their child. And so it was educating them that that child that died of cancer took a breath. So they're already viewed as a person. Our baby did not take a breath. So this is different. This is very, very narrow. And then we use data to say, 360 babies are stillborn in Minnesota every single year. So this is how much it would cost the state if every single family applied for this tax credit. So then we had to make it about the money. So we're like, it's only $800,000 if everybody did it. And they're like, oh, that's not that much. And so we had to like really take our feelings aside because like, of course that's a lot because this is our baby, this is our child. But we had to make it about the money for the tax committee because that's what they're focused on.
Yep.
Knowing that the outcome is to support families. And like if you want to be in the cutting edge of this tax credit for this, Minnesota should sign on to this because there's only 6 other states. So like making it appealing that way too.
Make it their decision. Yeah, putting
Yeah.
it in their hand. Yeah,
You got it. You got it.
it's all psychology. Yeah,
It is.
I've
It's
been
all
there. Yeah.
psychology. It is.
That's so impressive that you guys did that, especially like so early on in your like
Thank you.
grief process after losing Reese.
I guess that's what pushed you guys,
Yeah.
being it so close to when it happened, to like this is the drive, and
Mhm.
especially when you get like a foothold with that first person, and then a few more footholds with the subsequent people. It's like, oh, we're really going somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to know, you said there was 200 something babies born still in Minnesota every
360.
year? 360. So, I mean, it's been in place for 10 years now. I mean, that's a lot of families that you guys have impacted right there. That's amazing.
Awesome. Kudos to you.
And something that's really cool, I feel like, is now when our family and friends and just strangers, even when they fill out their tax information for the year, there's a question on like TurboTax is like, did you experience a stillbirth this year in the state of Minnesota? Because that would then trigger that tax money to come back to them. And so even seeing that is like, okay, these babies are not slipping through the cracks.
It's visible.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Oh, awesome.
talk about raising awareness
Right.
on your tax bill. Yeah.
Right, exactly. There's that. Yes.
What I'm also interested in is, so that this was Minnesota. Has there been any state since that you've seen, that you've tried, that you've helped, or is it really tough? And were you one of the lucky ones to be able to do it?
Yeah, there's been a few other states. Actually, right now, I think North Carolina is trying to get something like this. Or no, they're trying to get funding for Count the Kicks.
Found the cakes. Yes, I just went to the Bump Act press
Yes.
conference today for it. Yes.
But there have been other states. Ohio was a state that I worked with to try to get it passed, and they weren't able to get it passed. The other issue is when it's passed, if it's not being used, sometimes the states will take it away and use that money for something else. So a big piece of it is if the money is there for that state. So like we still work even now, 11 years after the fact, getting information out every tax season to let people know that this is a thing and you don't want this to go away. So if you did experience a stillbirth, here are the steps to claim this money. And so there have been a few states that money has now kind of been absorbed in other areas.
If it's because there's less stillbirths, then that's a good sign.
Right. That's great.
So, subsequent question for me then. Have you seen any change coming from it? Because obviously the state has to pay money, and so they want to prevent paying money. So are they doing anything preventing stillbirth, or has that not influenced your bill enough?
So that bill hasn't really influenced it, but since then, I starting in 2024, I started working to try to get legislation passed here in the state of Minnesota for funding for Count the Kids. So that there is funding for all resources to be free for Minnesota residents, for Count the Kicks resources, educating on the importance of tracking fetal movement. So when I started that in 2024, I was meeting with the Department of Health. I was meeting with large insurance organizations, um, meeting with hospitals, clinics, saying like, "Can you help fund this? Could you sponsor this? Could not get anybody to do it. Even the Minnesota Department of Health, I would flat out ask them, "Can you help me understand why this is not something you want to fund?" And they had said, "Well, we already fund bereavement services, and we help fund another nonprofit that kind of focuses on this already." And I'm like, "But you wouldn't have to fund bereavement services for stillborn babies if you funded prevention." So then that's when I started to pursue legislation, because I knew if the money came from the state and this initiative came from the state, it'd be forced down and it would have to be implemented. And so in 2025, I worked my butt off to get a bill introduced to the Senate. We testified. So I testified along with a woman who used Count the Kicks and her baby was saved. We all testified and said, "This is why this is important." And we were able to get that bill passed. There was a lot of opposition. There were a lot of people trying to stop it. We were able to get in really good with the Health and Human Services chair of that committee. That's where the bill was passed through, and she was able to push it forward. And so we got funding, $210,000 for a 3-year pilot program here in the state of Minnesota. So all Count the Kicks materials are free to Minnesota residents and their providers. And then we offer webinars for healthcare providers of how to use this information, how to talk about it, why it's important. And that's the sticking point, is many providers still don't want to talk about it. They don't want to give the information out because they think it's going to create more work for them, because more people will be coming into the clinic or the hospital because they're going to be worried about their baby's movement. That's not the point of the materials. But now that at least those resources are free. So they are free for 3 years till 2027. And now moving forward, working on finding more funding through legislation to continue that. And so, I mean, other than that, the state doesn't do much for prevention other than if it's like single, like one-off people trying to push for change. And I honestly think it's due to the fact that people don't know what stillbirth is until it happens to them.
It's one of those things that I come across during the marathons too. It's like when people cheer me on, it's like, "Hey, Angel Daddy, go!" And then sometimes, depending on how I feel and how the interaction goes, I'm like, "Do you actually know what it means?" I literally ask that question, and they're like, "No, no, what is it?" It's like, "Yeah, it actually means that you lost your baby," and then you can see the emotion overwhelming them. Well, granted, we were one of those people that didn't know it existed.
I mean, I
I
did.
mean, you did.
I'm a PA. I went through clinical rotations in OB. I saw stillbirths. I was there for stillbirths.
In the US?
And yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in Madagascar and in the US, I was there for stillbirths. And I still you just don't think it's going to happen to you,
Not at all.
you know? And I mean, I had a textbook pregnancy. Everything was perfect. I never had any issues.
Yep. And oftentimes, I mean, as you both know now, it's not just high risk pregnancies that people need to be educated about this. Like, it can happen to anyone.
Well, the frustrating part right now for me is we are now considered high risk.
Yep.
But there is no change, basically. We are a label, we will be monitored more, but not for the cause of Elodie's death. It's like having cancer and be like, "Yeah, but we're not screening for that cancer."
Right.
Yeah.
Basically,
Our
right?
doctors were like, we're going to do this next pregnancy. You're going to get NSTs every week. You're going to get more ultrasounds. Maybe we recommend, they were recommending more invasive procedures. And this was all before we knew the cause. And so when we brought them the cause, they basically said, oh, it wouldn't change our recommendations. And they still wouldn't measure the placenta, even though her small placenta was the cause of
Yep.
death. And they still wanted to recommend these invasive procedures over something that was non-invasive and just
Nope.
super quick and easy to do. And
Yep.
it was Yeah, ridiculous.
It's so
It's
backwards.
ridiculous, and it's because, like, what do they do when they find it? Because they have so many rules and regulations, and they're not treating us as patients and the babies as patients. It's like, well, this is you don't fall within this criteria, so therefore, what are we supposed to do if we find something like that? And I'm like, I don't know, monitor me more, reassure me that I'm okay, be proactive.
Right.
You're a statistic. You're a statistic. Period. Yeah.
I mean, it's a problem beyond just education in the general population of like people knowing that stillbirth exists and what it is, but also just in the medical field too, because I went through PA school. I went through 2 different OB rotations and never heard anything about placental monitoring or measurements, was never taught it. And for an organ that sustains life of the baby, I mean, you'd think people would wanna look at it more, but even just looking at the umbilical cord and doing, like, Dopplers of that during ultrasounds, like, that's really easy, but it's just not done.
I mean, and I had to push for that with my subsequent pregnancies, and I had to say even to my own doctor, I'm like, "I know that you won't deliver early if you see the cord wrapped around, Rhett's neck. I know that, but I need to have that reassurance for that 3 minutes that you're looking at it, that I feel like you're doing all you possibly can. Like, I just need that, um, so can you do it for me? Because my baby already died. Like, I just need you to do that." And oftentimes that ultrasound person, who is not my doctor, would question me. And I'd say, "Just do it. Look in my file. Just do it." And every single time they would question me. I even had a doctor in one of my appointments, not my regular OB, she was a different doctor. I was talking to her about how I was getting really nervous, um, because I had extra fluid with my youngest, my daughter, Maida, as well. So I had polyhydramnios, and I was getting nervous because we're getting closer to delivery. And this doctor said, "Well, not every acorn grows into a mighty oak." And I said, "Are you comparing my daughter's life to an acorn?" And she's like, "Well, not every baby is gonna survive." I'm like, "Oh my god." And then I just said, "We're done here," and I just got up and walked out. Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah. Well, and so we actually met with a new OB, this past week, and we asked about for us, what's really important is, like, placental measurements because that was, the cause of Ellery's death, and so we were asking about EPV and measuring the placenta for subsequent pregnancy, and our provider went and talked to the doctors on staff and ultimately came back and said, "We'll do it." She's like, "But," she's like, "it's not gonna change anything because you're already gonna undergo all the extra monitoring." But to me, that also implies that if you measure the placenta on like, if you had measured my placenta the first time, you're implying that you're doing it to determine if you need additional monitoring, that if that placenta was measured small, you would do more monitoring. So she's basically like, if we measure the placenta and it's small again, nothing changes because you're already getting the additional monitoring we would have done.
Yep.
And I'm like,
Right?
yeah.
I know. I know.
Going back to count the kicks. So it's just been for about a year now, this pilot program.
Yes.
How is that being implemented in the clinics? Are you guys having to go to like all these individual clinics? Is it coming from something else that it's being brought to them? Do they have to ask for it?
So, we launched in July of 2025, and Count the Kicks for Healthy Birthday. What they did is they have a list of all the clinics and hospitals in the state. So we pushed out all that information. Everyone got like a little a brochure of Count the Kicks and then a letter saying these resources are now made available. Here's why this is important. Learn more here, a QR code. And so every clinic and hospital in the state got that. Then what we did is in August and November, we offered free webinars for anybody that wanted to attend, focusing more on healthcare professionals, public health professionals, and folks that are working with pregnant people to attend. And that's where we talked about the evidence behind it, the research, how you implement it. And then what we've done is we've partnered with the Minnesota Department of Health, and then they've helped kind of disseminate some of that information as well. And then attend different conferences, tabling, and then I presented at a few of those conferences as well about why this is important, how to get the tools, We recently were at the Minnesota AWAN convention where we presented on Count the Kicks and why this is important, and then the research behind it as well, because that's always something that people are like, well, there's not enough research. So we really push the research piece when we're talking to the healthcare professionals.
Such a statement. There's not enough research.
Yep.
What do
Yep.
you call enough? What is enough?
Right.
Is 200 enough? Well, here's 200. This is like such an easy excuse. I feel like.
Yep. Especially when you've got other countries that are implementing it and they see positive results. Like, I don't know how much more you need.
I mean, we're talking about saving babies.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like kick counting is just so easy. Just talk to your patient, have them do it, It doesn't require anything.
Nothing. And when I was 37 weeks pregnant with Reese, I went into the appointment because at that point I was still considering a vaginal delivery with her, but I had been noticing some changes in her movements, but I wasn't tracking anything. So when I went into my 37-week appointment, I said, should I be counting kicks? And the midwife said, like, oh, yeah. And I said, "Oh, what does that look like?" And she said, 10 kicks in 2 hours. And I said, every 2 hours? Like, how do I do this? And she was like, no, just pick a time during the day. So when her response was so like relaxed, I was like, okay, I guess I don't really have to do this. And in that appointment is when I asked for a scheduled C-section. Because at that point, like I said before, I was considering a vaginal delivery. But I knew with a C-section, they would deliver at 39 weeks. I knew that. So with all of the information and the like answered with her and the extra fluid that I had and the extra monitoring, I was like, this baby just seems to be safer on the outside than the in. And so she said, we're going to schedule you for 39 weeks in one day because your due date is on a Sunday and we don't do elective C-sections on Sundays. And my husband said, I feel like, what are we waiting for? Like, I feel like this baby is ready to come. And she said, well, I'll step out and talk to the doctor. And so then she came back in and she's like, well, if you deliver early, there's a risk of the baby's lungs not being developed and it'd be spending some time in the NICU. And I was like, oh, okay, like 39 and 1, I guess is what we'll go with. But now it's like all of those things, none of those things actually considered the health of my baby or me with my intuition. It was like, well, this is just what we do. Even though there's been indicators that Reese is she's not in a healthy state. Like there's things that are going on. I've got so much extra fluid. Like, what are we waiting for? And I just felt like this is just what we do. We follow the procedure. We don't actually consider what's going on with the patient or the baby.
So what is the ideal education to give someone who's pregnant in terms of monitoring their baby's movements?
It's all based around when you get to 28 weeks, babies tend to get into more of a normal or pattern with their movements. And it's important to get to know what's normal for your baby. There's outdated information that says, 10 kicks in 2 hours. That's actually not accurate because every baby is different. It could take your baby typically 15 minutes, every day, and then all of a sudden 2 hours. Well, it's still within the realm of 10 and 2, but that's not your baby's normal. So getting to know your baby's normal, how long does it take for them to get 10 kicks? It can be 10 minutes, it can be 15 minutes, it can be an hour, but that's normal for your baby because you're tracking it. And Count the Kicks has a free app where you can track that. It's got historical data so you can look back. Reese was a very active baby. She was active until she wasn't. And if I were using that app with her, if I knew about it, and then I was going to use it with her little brother, Rhett, he was a super, super inactive, lazy baby. But I wasn't worried because that was his normal, because I was tracking that. But if I didn't, and I would have been worried about him way more than I was worried about her. But I had that information, so I knew. And so that's starting at 28 weeks, getting to know what's normal for your baby, 10 kicks. As long as, there's going to be a little bit of fluctuation. Those movements are going to change as you get bigger, as the baby grows, but there needs to be movement.
All right. So if people have any questions, where can they go?
If they've got questions specifically about Count the Kicks, they can go to countthekicks.org and you can search by state. Some states have free materials and you can order that information or those print materials. There's a free app. That app takes the data will remind you to kick, like, oh, today, it's time for you to sit down and bond with your baby. It's got all the information there, and you can also upload that information into the medical files to message your doctor if there's a question. Even if they're not free for your state, you can still, the app is free. The paper printouts are free.
Would you say that's the given the current environment we're in medically? I mean, I wanna emphasize it's still there's still a lot done in the medical world. We were very well helped. It's only when things go south that's when the help is very inadequate. But
Yes.
up until then, I feel like there's people, the nurses and all that were very helpful and very well. So all that to say, if you feel like you're dissatisfied with your medical team, with and you want to do some other stuff on your own, not to say anything medical, I'm not saying that. But so going to you guys' website might be a start. What are
Absolutely.
some other things you'd say as a pregnant woman? What can you do to just make sure that you have, let's say, all the ropes in your own hand? What is it? All the
Resources, tools.
tools? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think from my perspective is reminding yourself that your intuition matters. And so if you don't feel like you're getting adequate care from your doctor, you get to ask for better care. If you're in the hospital being monitored and the doctor's like everything looks good, but you're not reassured, you get to stay until you're reassured. And advocating for your baby doesn't have to start after birth. Advocating for your baby starts while you're pregnant. Advocating for yourself, you should always be doing. And I think, best case scenario, if you're concerned, you go into labor and delivery and you get sent home because everything looks good and you feel good about that. That's great. I mean, that's great. And so I think that, never second guessing yourself. If you don't feel like you're getting adequate care, there are choices. You get to make a different choice, even if that's changing, your clinic or your provider when you've got 3 weeks before you deliver. That's okay. But you are the one that's in control, and your opinion and the way that you feel matters.
Very strong statement.
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. So, what has been your perception of trying to make change, trying to bring change? Obviously, you've done amazing work in the legislation part. Do you think the most amount of change, or the best change, would come? I don't know, going to insurance companies, going to medical centers, going to where do you think we can move the needle, if at all?
So I personally think that the onus should not be on the parents to have to know all of the information. I think the biggest change personally is who are the people that hold the systemic power. And so in my mind, the way that's one of the reasons why I went for legislation, because I knew even above insurance organizations or hospitals, if the power is coming from and the charge is coming from legislation, there's almost like you have to do it now. But I do think without the systemic change, it's such a hard fight if we're doing it one on one alone. But I do think it's as crappy as it is, it's falling on the onus of the parents and those that are grieving because we are the ones who experienced it and we don't want anyone else to have to experience it. But unfortunately, the people in power, the system changes where I think this has to come from.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, just as a final wrap up question, if someone has lost a child, lost a pregnancy, had a stillbirth recently or in the past, what is one piece of advice that you would give them?
I think I spent a lot of the first 6 months blaming myself and finally getting to a point where I did the best that I could with the information that I had. And I'd like to think that most every parent who's experienced this did the best that they could with the information that they had. And it's one of those things where once you know better, you do better. The blame I think is normal. For me, it was something I needed to go to work through. But if you've experienced the death of your child in this way, that's enough pain as it is. And so reminding yourself and giving yourself some grace that you did the best you could with the information you had.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again
Much.
for being here on the podcast. And we'll be in Minnesota next month. So
Yes.
if you're around,
Yeah.
maybe we'll get to
Yes.
meet you in person, which would be
That's
great.
awesome. Yeah, absolutely.